Ready for a deep dive? Let's journey back in time to the Sultanate period in India.
Oh, fascinating period. Roughly 1206 to 1526 CE.
Yeah, tons of cultural exchange happening then.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to uncover how the Sultanate era shaped artistic and musical traditions in India.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story how much of that impact we can still see and hear today.
Our sources: academic works, mostly on Indian architecture, history, even some literature.
A nice blend.
Okay, so let's start with something that surprised me. I learned that early sultans like Babur, they weren't actually that focused on building religious structures.
Interesting, right? They were more into gardens and palaces.
Yeah, more into gardens and palaces,
Yeah.
like Babur's memoirs. They're full of these super detailed descriptions of gardens.
Yeah, it's clear nature and design were close to his heart.
But as the Sultanate evolved, they definitely shifted gears when it came to religious architecture.
Definitely, yeah. A good example is Akbar.
Oh yeah, Akbar. The sources point to him as a real game changer.
He
For example, his patronage of the Grand Khanqah at Fatehpur Sikri.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. A complex for Sufi spiritual study and meditation. Pretty significant choice.
Why was that such a significant choice?
Well, it was definitely a power move. See, by supporting a Sufi institution like the Khanqah,
Smart.
Akbar very skillfully intertwined religious authority with his own political power.
It's like architecture is a tool to legitimize rule.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
And it wasn't just the rulers.
Right.
Nobles got in on the action, too.
The nobles?
Vying for the Sultan's favor, they were also commissioning impressive buildings.
Oh, to try to impress the Sultan.
Of course, and that's where those magnificent sarais come in.
The sarais.
You know, those roadside inns, they built a whole network of them along the Delhi-Agra road.
Oh, wow.
And these weren't just rest stops. Oh, no, they were bold statements.
Statements of
Power, prestige, wealth.
all strategically placed along this vital trade route.
It really makes you think about what it would have been like.
To travel that road.
Exactly. To journey along the Delhi-Agra road back then and see these sarais.
Must have been quite a sight.
Absolutely. And speaking of powerful figures.
Oh, yeah? Who else?
Well, we can't forget Maryam al-Zamani, Akbar's mother.
Oh, interesting. She wasn't just like a passive bystander, was she?
No, not at all. She was a businesswoman, deeply involved in trade.
Really?
And she invested heavily in building sarais to protect her caravans and investments.
I had no idea.
It really challenges those assumptions about women playing only secondary roles during this time.
Absolutely.
This was a woman who actively shaped the economic and architectural landscape of the Sultanate.
Okay, so we've got rulers, nobles, even the Queen Mother fueling this building boom.
Yeah, it was a busy time.
But it wasn't just about the quantity of buildings, right?
No, it was about style, too.
It was this real melting pot of influences.
You're absolutely right.
This unique fusion of style.
Like a cultural blender, mixing Persian and Central Asian influences with existing Indian traditions.
Oh, I like that.
And you can see this fusion most clearly in the architecture.
Oh, for sure. Like, where would be a good example of that?
Well, the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque in Delhi.
Oh, yes. That's a beautiful mosque.
It's one of the earliest examples of this Indo-Islamic architecture.
I've seen pictures. It's amazing. And they use that trabeated construction there, right?
Exactly. Trabeated construction, or the post and lintel system.
That's a distinctly Indian technique.
It is interesting because in other regions in Islamic architecture, you typically see vaulted structures.
Yeah.
Instead, they incorporated this very Indian element.
So they weren't trying to, like, erase the existing traditions.
No, not at all. It was more about weaving them together.
With these new influences.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's Akbar and the Jama Masjid at Fatehpur Sikri.
Oh, yeah, another great example.
Such intricate detail.
There's Timurid geometric patterns, arabesques, floral motifs, all within this mosque that blends so many influences.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's a perfect example of how the Sultanate took these different architectural elements and transformed them.
To create this unique visual language.
Exactly. They weren't just borrowing, they were innovating, blending to create something new.
That's so cool. And this fusion, it wasn't just about aesthetics, was it?
No, it's deeper than that.
It reflected this ambition to weave together these diverse cultural elements.
And to forge a distinct Indo-Islamic identity.
That's so interesting. So we're seeing this incredible fusion in architecture. But what about music?
Good question.
Did this blending of traditions extend to the performance arts as well?
Well, our sources mainly focus on the visual arts.
Right.
But it's very clear that the arts, including music and dance, were highly valued during this time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The level of patronage for architecture and the visual arts, it really suggests that performance traditions were flourishing too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's fascinating to think about how this fusion we've been talking about might have played out in music.
Right. Imagine like blending Persian and Central Asian musical traditions
With their melodic richness and complex rhythms.
and then combining that with Indian classical music.
Could that be where some of the instruments and ragas and talas that are so central to Indian music today, where those originated?
It's a really compelling possibility.
It is. The Sultanate era might have been this catalyst for amazing musical innovation,
Wow.
enriching the already diverse world of Indian music.
And even though our sources don't give us specifics about musical forms,
Right, that's true.
it's safe to say that music and dance played a big part in courtly life and religious ceremonies back then.
Oh, absolutely, they would have.
It's amazing to consider how much artistic energy, how much creativity was swirling around during this
You
period.
just feel it.
From these grand architectural projects to the music echoing through the halls.
A vibrant time for the arts.
The Sultanate era must have been truly vibrant.
Indeed. And it's so important to remember that these artistic choices weren't happening in a vacuum.
Oh, right, there's a whole context.
The political dynamics of the time.
The quest for legitimacy, all those power struggles.
All of that likely played a part in shaping these artistic expressions.
So it's not just about beautiful buildings and captivating music, is it?
It goes much deeper. It's about power, identity, the stories that art can tell.
This deep dive has already given me so much to think about.
We're just getting started. Stay with us as we uncover more of the fascinating ways the Sultanate shaped the artistic and musical landscape of India.
So we've been talking about this incredible fusion of styles during the Sultanate period.
Yeah, lots of blending happening.
I'm really curious about the specifics. Like, are there any architectural details that stand out as really good examples of this blend?
Oh, tons. The sources are full of them.
Okay, give me one.
Well, one that really jumps out is the use of the chaja.
The chaja.
You know, that projecting or overhanging eave.
Oh, right. Like common in traditional Indian architecture.
Yeah. But in the Sultanate era, you see it being incorporated in this new way,
A new way how?
often supported by these beautifully ornate brackets.
Oh, interesting. So they took something functional, like an eave, and gave it this artistic twist.
Exactly. It highlights how builders weren't just borrowing elements, they were adapting them, transforming them.
Creating a unique visual vocabulary.
Precisely. Another example, you've probably seen this one, is the use of jali work.
Jolly work. Oh, yeah. That intricate lattice work.
Often made of stone or marble.
You see it in mosques, palaces.
All beautiful and functional.
Yeah. It provides ventilation and shade, but also creates these amazing patterns of light and shadow.
It's stunning. And, you know, it's fascinating.
What's fascinating?
Jali work was traditionally a feature of Hindu temples.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
But during the Sultanate period, you see it seamlessly integrated into Islamic religious structures.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It shows how fluid those artistic boundaries were during this period.
They were open to embracing and adapting these diverse aesthetics.
And in doing so, they created something entirely new.
Okay, so we've talked about Indian elements being adapted. But what about influences flowing the other way?
Ah, yes.
The sources mention Timurid influences.
Particularly in spatial organization and decorative motifs.
Like what specifically?
Well, Timurid architecture, you know, it's known for its grand courtyards,
Yeah.
symmetrical layouts, intricate tile work.
Right.
All of that had a definite impact on Sultanate architecture.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, so the emphasis on formal gardens
Oh, yeah, bartering.
reflects the Timurid love for structured natural beauty, that geometric precision.
And we see that reflected in things like Babur's gardens.
Absolutely.
I remember the sources talking about those, designed with such attention to the geometric layouts, the water channels, all the different trees and flowers.
These are like little paradises,
Oh, wow.
designed to offer respite from the heat and dust.
A little oasis.
And this appreciation for gardens, it wasn't limited to personal spaces either.
Really? Where else did you see it?
Even in those sarais we talked about earlier, they often incorporated gardens.
So travelers could relax and enjoy a bit of nature.
Exactly. It adds another layer to understanding the impact of these architectural choices.
It wasn't just a place to rest. It was this whole experience.
It was. They were creating spaces that were both functional and beautiful.
Practical and beautiful.
The Sultanate builders, they had this strong artistic vision.
Drawing from so many different influences.
Right. Now let's zoom out a bit.
Go for it.
Think about the broader context of art production.
Okay, I'm thinking.
What about the role of workshops, the transmission of artistic skills during this time?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, were there specific centers where artists and artisans would congregate?
That's a great question. And based on the sources,
What did they say?
it seems like workshops play a key role
In
in both artistic innovation and the training of new generations of artisans.
It makes sense.
We don't have details about specific locations, but there were definitely centers where artisans specialized in various crafts.
So you'd have stone carvers, calligraphers, miniature painters, weavers.
A whole community of skilled artisans contributing to this incredible artistic output.
It makes me think about the individuals behind these grand buildings and intricate artworks.
Yeah, what about those people?
What do the sources say about them?
Well, most of the focus is on the architectural aspects,
Right.
but they do hint at the presence of master builders, designers,
Those unsung heroes.
whose names might be lost to history, but their legacy lives on in the structures they created.
It's amazing to think about the level of skill, the creativity.
He was
It
remarkable.
wasn't just rulers and nobles.
No, it was the hands and minds of countless artisans.
And the transmission of these skills, that probably happened through apprenticeships, right?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
That master-student relationship.
Ensuring the continuation of traditions.
And allowing for the development of new techniques and styles.
So we've talked about architecture, patronage, the role of workshops, but we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to music.
All right, music is a whole other world.
The sources don't give us a lot of specifics,
They don't.
but what clues can we gather about how musical traditions evolved during this time?
Good question. Well, we have to look at other aspects
Okay.
and make some educated guesses.
Okay.
For instance, the patronage of Sufi saints and institutions like that Khanqah we discussed earlier at Fatehpur Sikri.
Okay.
That suggests that Sufi musical traditions were flourishing.
Makes sense.
Sufi music, with its devotional poetry and ecstatic rhythms, that would have been an essential part of those spaces.
So by looking at the architecture, we can get some insight into the musical landscape.
Exactly. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
I like that analogy.
And if we think about how much cultural fusion was happening in other art forms,
Right.
it's very reasonable to assume that musical styles were also being influenced,
Yeah, makes sense. And like the arrival of instruments like the sitar,
often attributed to this period.
that suggests a dynamic exchange between Persian and Indian musical traditions.
It does. And the sitar, with those beautiful, complex melodies, it's amazing.
It makes you wonder how much the soundscape of India was transformed.
By this mixing of instruments and musical ideas, it's a really fascinating area to explore.
It is. And we can't forget about dance.
Well, of course.
The sources mention courtly entertainment, which probably included dance performances.
Right.
It's so interesting to think about how dance forms from Central Asia and Persia.
Might have interacted with existing Indian classical dance traditions.
Can you imagine these courtly gatherings?
With music, dancing, all these different influences.
It sounds like a truly vibrant blend of cultures.
It was. And these performances, they weren't just entertainment.
There were more than that.
Oh, yeah. They were expressions of power, prestige, cultural identity.
The arts, in all their forms, woven into the fabric of life during the Sultanate era.
Exactly.
It's incredible how much we can learn about a historical period just through its art and music.
It's amazing, isn't it?
This deep dive is really opening my eyes to the nuances of this era.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We go beyond the surface, peel back the layers,
Discover those hidden connections.
and those unexpected turns that make history so fascinating.
Absolutely. We're only just scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover as we delve deeper into this topic. We've talked a lot about this fusion of styles, how all these different influences came together during the Sultanate period.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating.
But I'm wondering, was it all like smooth sailing?
What do you mean?
Was all this cultural exchange welcomed with open arms? Or was there some pushback?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that really adds nuance to our understanding of this period.
So what do you think?
Well, our sources don't explicitly talk about resistance,
Right.
but it's important to remember that history is rarely a simple, straightforward narrative.
Oh, for sure. Things are always more complicated than they seem.
Exactly. Cultural exchange can lead to incredible things.
Like what we've been discussing.
Right. But it can also create tension and friction.
I guess it makes sense that some people might have resisted these new influences.
Especially when it comes to something as deeply rooted as art and culture.
Yeah, change can be unsettling.
And the Sultanate period was a time of huge political upheaval.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Imagine like a traditional temple architect.
Being asked to incorporate Islamic design elements into a Hindu structure.
Yeah, that must spark some debate.
Oh, I'm sure there were disagreements, maybe even outright rejection.
It's easy to assume that everyone just embraced this fusion wholeheartedly.
But it was probably much more complex than that.
It makes me think about those individual stories, the compromises, the struggles that might have happened behind the scenes.
It's fascinating to think about, and while our sources don't go into those specifics,
Right.
they do hint at this diversity of artistic production during this time.
Okay, like what?
Well, you see these variations in regional styles.
Okay.
You see the persistence of older forms alongside new ones.
So it's not like everything just changed overnight.
No, not at all. And then there's the emergence of these hybrid styles that are hard to categorize.
A real mix and match.
It all points to this dynamic and complex interplay of influences marked by both collaboration and contestation.
It's like we're looking at a puzzle with missing pieces.
Oh, I like that.
We see the big picture of this fusion, but there are these gaps.
Gaps that represent those individual stories.
Those tensions, those moments of pushback.
All of which shaped the artistic landscape.
Exactly. And those missing pieces, they're part of what makes history so captivating.
Don't you think?
Totally.
Yeah.
They invite us to think critically, to use our imagination, to fill in the blanks with our own interpretations.
And it reminds us that history isn't static. It's not one-dimensional.
It's a living, breathing thing.
It's like a tapestry with countless threads, some bright, some faded.
So if we consider all of this, the fusion, the potential resistance, those individual stories,
Right.
how does it shape our understanding of the Sultanate's impact on Indian art and music?
It tells us that the story is much more intricate than just saying it was all fusion or it was all imposition.
It's a process.
A dynamic process.
Shaped by so many factors.
Patronage, cultural exchange, individual creativity.
And yeah, probably some resistance, some tension too.
And all of that complexity, it's reflected in the rich artistic legacy we see in India today.
That makes a lot of sense. This deep dive has really been eye-opening.
I'm glad.
I'm seeing the Sultanate period in a whole new light.
That's what we like to hear.
It's not just the art and music themselves, but the people, the ideas, the power dynamics.
It all comes together.
To our listener, keep exploring this period. Keep questioning, keep digging deeper.
There's always more to discover.
More stories to uncover, more insights to be found.
Maybe you'll even find some of those missing puzzle pieces.
Those individual narratives that help us understand this period.
In all its complexity.
What a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this incredible journey through the Sultanate period.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep those curious minds buzzing.
Happy digging.